Yeah, so we had a fire about 2:30 in the morning out on Snowberry, the former area of Engine 33. Second shift or morning, we're going off of our second morning. Came in as a report of a structure fire with Folsom PD units on scene.
The call came in at about 2:45 in the morning for Snowberry structure fire. We were talking on the way there because we had been to another residential structure fire.
It turns out three houses down from the one we were responding to that morning.
We're familiar with the houses along there. It's right, overlooks the bluffs. So we go out there every now and then, take a look at the houses. We also knew from the fire that we were on a couple weeks previously that those houses have very unusual features on the second floor and in the attic space with a lot of hidden areas.
Also, some other features that are unique to that area is just this neighborhood is a one way in, one way out. And so apparatus placement is pretty important as we go to these fires. And that was also briefly discussed.
We arrived on scene. We had a vehicle that was parked directly in front of the house. So we pulled up next to that vehicle.
As we were making the right-hand turn onto Snowberry, I saw Battalion 13 approaching that intersection. About that same time, we had Engine 22 arrive and give an arrival report.
Engine 22 is on scene. We have a two-story large residential. We have fire coming from the attic on the Delta side. Engine 22 is going to be initiating a fire attack. We have our water supply directly in front of the house next to intake command.
Got out of the rig, met Brandon at the front door. I peeked in and saw that there was nothing interior that we could see on the first floor, but knew we'd be going to the second floor. So we still masked up at the front door.
Because of the timing and having Battalion 13 shortly behind us, we were second arriving. We bypassed command. I did voice over the radio that we had arrived. We're going to assist with water supply, and we self-assigned to pull a second attack line. And Engineer Stoops, who was riding in the back seat, jumped out and pulled that attack line.
By the time I got back to the engine and charged the first line, there was already somebody pulling the blue line off the back. And as Steve said, there was a hydrant in the front yard, so we were already working on water supply. Actually got water supply charged by the time I charged the second line.
Went interior, got a quick look at the man door to the garage. There was no heat to it. I opened it real quick. We had some light brown smoke whiffed in from there. And then we pushed up to the second floor. Good at the second floor, still no real noticeable smoke. Noticed the smoke detectors weren't going off. Looked up and saw fire through the intake vent. So I pulled that down with the hook. Brandon put some water up into the attic through the intake vent, and then we pushed through the master bedroom to find the scuttle. And that was when popped ceiling and saw that we had a working attic fire. I also got the primary done real quick when Brandon was getting the line in to the scuttle.
I pulled the rear dead load off of their rig and went to the Delta side of the structure that had some heavy fire involvement already done. It was starting to think coming out of the gable.
Stoops stretched that line down the Delta side. We did knock down some of that exterior fire that also was starting to impinge on an outbuilding or a shed, which turns out may or may not have been the possible origin. From that exterior, it looks as though it had gotten up into a gable vent. While we were stretching that and Stoops was knocking down that exterior fire, I got eyes on that Charlie side, updated conditions, and those reports were that we'd had smoke coming from gable vents on all the way around the structure. Shortly after that, we started to transition to the interior.
So for that first line, I mean, it was an easy pull from the engine to the front door. Like we were saying, we masked up right at the front door. Something that I learned from myself is that we didn't really get a good look in conditions on the inside on the first floor. So we had charged the line at the front door, and at that point we opened the door and conditions were clear. We had to unfortunately make our way upstairs and with the charge line. But at that point, it was a straight shot up the stairs to the master bedroom into the closet. We found that scuttle, and there was obviously working fire.
About the time that we transitioned from the exterior into the interior, Medic 32 self-assigned, and I'll let Firefighter Brodigan talk about that.
Yeah, so we arrived. I recognized the Snowberry address as the fire that we were on a few months prior, so I already had an idea going into it. on what to expect as far as layout of the house and that kind of stuff. I told my partner, probationary firefighter Jensen, I was like, hey, Engine 32 is pulling a line to the Delta side, because Stoops and I crossed paths as I was running up to the Alpha side of the house. I was like, go back them up, I'm gonna go back up 22. So backed up 22, firefighter Richardson looked at me and he said, hey, I'm gonna go find a scuttle hole. So I proceeded with the nozzle up into the second floor. At that time, I looked up, saw a fire above me coming out of one of the heater vents, sprayed that really quick. Firefighter Richardson came back and said, we have a scuttle hole here in the master bedroom. I had no smoke or fire on the first floor or on the second floor. Conditions were ideal. We opened up the scuttle hole, got a quick knock on the attic fire. At that time, it sounds like Engine 32 was applying water on the Delta side. Got up there, started checking for extension, and I mean, there was just so much steam up there at that time. With the tick, I couldn't really see anything, but it sounds like at that time, Stoops was coming up and going around to the other side, because there was a turn in the attic where the fire was at that time that I couldn't see.
So I ended up missing that initial recommendation from my senior firefighter, and I ended up backing him up the stairwell. So I saw him grab the nozzle and run up the stairs to that scuttle hole that 22 had found, and started yarding hose into the kitchen, essentially down the hallway into the kitchen to help assist with fire attack and hose deployment up the stairs. Then we transitioned into salvage and overhaul. Learning point for me was not moving all their expensive equipment outside in the front yard, which would be in the way of essentially our hose lines. We found a clean bedroom just down the hallway that was not going to be affected, and put the TVs in there. One learning point that I learned to talk to Captain Bear about after the fact was medic placement. They did call for a second medic. I think medic 36 showed up, 35. Our ambulance, when we left the scene after everything was done, we had to go kind of around and make a couple turns to get out of there, 3-point turns in the neighborhood, taking a few seconds to have better egress, maybe backing the medic up, or if there was a second victim that we had to transport, just being able to get out there faster would have been my learning point for sure. Biggest takeaway was just the medic placement, honestly, is knowing quick knockdown, quick search is a high priority, but knowing that we, especially as the medic, life priority, safety, transport is going to be our biggest priority if we do find a victim. So just having a rapid means of egress, I'll be more cognizant on the next time.
I'd say people using restraint from, there's at many points, there was a very, people weren't looking for things to do just for the sake of being seen doing something. There's a lot of good restraint, which I think led to, after the fact, the house was, other than the main bedroom and a hallway, was pretty good shape.
I think the only thing that I can think of is when we were en route, I think all three of us were kind of communicating like, hey, this is on Snowberry. This is the same street that we just had the last fire on. So we were also thinking that depending on where the location of the fire could be, it could also be an attic fire, it could be a bedroom fire. So we just knew that there were going to be multiple void spaces or something maybe over the garage just like the last one. That's exactly what happened.
Yeah, well, I guess the one thing that I didn't really think about until we talked about it after the fire was that so I tried to place the engine the best I could for my firefighter to pull a line, but there was a few cars in the way, so I couldn't really do the pull past. And given that the house had such a steep pitch on it, I didn't think about the fact that we could have used the aerial. So maybe if you do have the time to think about that, allow the space for the aerial to come in and be able to work, because those guys on the rescue had a really, really difficult job.
I think the big takeaway for me, and one of the talking points that we had during the AAR immediately after, was because of the arrival, the order of arrival, Engine 22, followed by us shortly thereafter, followed by Medic 32, Engine 29, and then Battalion 13, all within probably 30 to 45 seconds. What we essentially had was 4 units on scene, all of whom self-assigned, and there still was not an actual command that had been taken. So just kind of a food for thought. What's as a company officer, what's your threshold, what's your breakover point between assuming command and delegating, or going right into your roles per our SOG. That was just kind of an interesting discussion afterwards. Also, like I said earlier, cleaning up the verbiage on, after completing a hasty search on that first floor to clear it of fire before we started making our way up the stairs, communicating that it was clear of fire and also there were no victims on the first floor, without communicating that confusion because we as a unit were not assigned to primary search. So just a couple things that I could clean up going forward.
The really nice thing is that Rescue 21 got in real quick after doing their vent. We had Truck 65, we had Engine 29, and everybody that was working interior, we did an excellent job. I heard multiple people call it out as don't put too much water in the attic, just use what we could to extinguish it. We did have to pull ceiling in a couple places because of the configuration of the attic to get to where the fire was. But we only used as much water as necessary to not soak the attic and cause all the sheetrock and the insulation to drop into the second floor. So we did a great job with water management into the attic space. Once we had confirmed knockdown in the attic though, we called kind of an all stop, and I know it was a little frustrating for some of the personnel on scene, but it was definitely worthwhile. We kind of called an all stop, and we brought the homeowner inside to allow them to collect clothes and possessions like phone, laptop, some handguns that the homeowner had, and some other things like that they wanted to get before we started pulling the sheetrock and the insulation. So the crews did an excellent job of sheeting everything that was of any value. We used salvage covers from the get-go, and actually I remember is after we got knocked down on the fire, I was heading outside to talk to command, and I saw somebody who was walking in, noticed that there was a coupling about 5 feet inside the front door was leaking, and they actually grabbed the hose and pulled the coupling to the exterior so that way we wouldn't be getting a lot of water on the first floor that wasn't even involved.
So one of the things that was really impressive about this fire, in my opinion, was the coordination that the crews had, internally and externally. My first impression of the fire was that, we had a very established attic fire. I was not going to be too surprised if the fire had extended down into the bedrooms on the second floor. And the crews did an amazing job of, one, getting ahead of the fire, containing it, searching it out, working together, and really, really minimizing the extent of damage other than water damage on that second floor. We had a lot of crews converge on the incident at the same time, and the crews worked it out. There was a little bit of deconflict and reconciliation we had to do in the first couple of minutes, but that worked out really well. The crews communicated clearly, and that helped drive that process forward so we could get the focus of effort and energy up on that second floor into the attic. One thing that, in retrospect, looking back on it, it's one of those things where, I reflected on the command piece. Was I over communicating? Was I under communicating? I felt like in some ways, maybe perhaps we could have, simplified some of the radio traffic. I think that's always a challenge. I think it did help coordinate some of the work that the crews are doing, to coordinate crews on the outside and the inside. One thing that I did like was that we had, at various times throughout the incident, we had inputs from external crews like Engine 36 on the Bravo side, 32 early on the Charlie side, Truck 65 working inside and outside, monitoring smoke conditions, communicating back and forth. Because one thing that we did have a little bit of a challenge with, and concern I had, was finding those areas of hidden fire, knowing the challenges we had on the fire 3 houses down 3 months prior. That communication piece did help. So I think overall, it may have seemed like a lot, and it probably was a lot, but again, I look at the output there and the outcome of a successful fire. No injuries, good property conservation, the fire was stopped, and overall the homeowners were very pleased with what the guys did. I was very, very pleased and very impressed by that.